So first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me today. So in this talk, I will present some work in collaboration with Nicolas Bonichon and Adrien Tanassa, which will be presented about floor plans and permutations in higher dimensions. So first of all, in 2D, a mosaic floor plan is a partition of a rectangle into interior disjoint rectangles that we call blocks, such that no points belong to the boundary of four rectangles. So this condition is called the tatami rule and is equivalent as forbidding the intersection of two segments in the partitioning. So in fact, we only consider T-junctions between the segments. Additionally, with this definition, we can see that we do not allow for overlapping of blocks, and we must also fill any holes in the rectangle by some blocks, like shown here. Then, to consider floor plans as combinatorial objects, we will consider them with an equivalence relation. So we will say that two floor plans are the same if we can go from one to the other by changing the size of the blocks. So for instance, here, I can do this deformation of the blocks to go from the first to the second, like so. So we consider them equivalent. So more formally, to define this equivalence relation, we will define posets of the elements of a floor plan. So in this case, we consider the so-called weak equivalence, which is obtained by considering posets of the blocks. So for two blocks B1 and B2, we say that B1 is to the left of B2 if we have either a vertical segment that contains the left side of B2 and the right side of B1, or there is a chain of blocks, such as this is the case 2 by 2 for the blocks. So here, this situation is a transitive closure of this one. So similarly, we can define B1 is above B2 by considering an horizontal segment. So we call those two relations direction relations, and as I've said, they are posets of the blocks. Then we consider that two floor plans are structurally equivalent if their posets are the same up to some relabeling of the blocks. So for instance, if I have those three floor plans, the first two are equivalent because I can draw the poset with respect to the x-axis and to the y-axis here, and you see that they are the same, whereas here I have the one of the third floor plan. So outside of combinatorics, floor plans appear in different applied fields. One of them is the design of integrated circuits, where people have a step that they call floor planning, where they represent electrical components as blocks and try to optimize the configurations of those blocks, such as reducing the size of the chip, etc., etc. You also have some floor plans which appear in visual art, like as in this painting.
Do you have an idea why do we forbid?
So here, for the floor plans, it's a bit more general, so they consider not the mosaic ones, sometimes just the floor plans. Also, they have some representation in terms of what we call slicing floor plans, which is some subset of the mosaic ones, which I will talk about. So, from a combinatorial point of view, mosaic floor plans with this weak equivalence are known to belong to the so-called Baxter combinatorial family. So this is a family of combinatorial objects which are all in backjation with each other and are continued by the Baxter numbers, whose expression is given here. So this implies that floor plans are structures that are in relation with many other combinatorial objects, among which we have the so-called Baxter permutations, which will be the focus of this work. So those permutations are very well known and can be defined by some forbidden configurations that we call patterns. So we'll present them at some point in the talk, the notion of pattern in permutations and how to avoid them. So to summarize this bijection, the idea is that given a permutation, you can associate each point to a block in the floor plan space. And you can do so such that the relative position of the points between each other, which are here shown by edges of different colors, will correspond to the direction relation of the blocks that I've defined earlier. And if you do this well, you have that the x coordinates and the y coordinates of the points in the permutation will correspond to pinning orders with respect to some corners. So this was done in 2006 by Ackermann, Barkey, and Pinter. And another interesting point is that it specializes also to another bijection between separable permutations, which are another class of well-known permutations, and the slicing floor plans, which I've talked about. So those slicing floor plans are just the floor plan which you can obtain by cutting rectangles in two. So here it starts with one block, and you can have more blocks just by cutting the rectangles with respect to some axis. So then, in this work, we wanted to generalize this construction to higher dimensions. So we wanted to have some representation of blocks in dimension d, and to see if we could represent them with permutations. So, in fact, this was already done in 2010 by Azinovsky and Mansour for the slicing floor plans. So they generalized the bijection between separable permutations and slicing floor plans to one between guillotine partitions in dimension 2 to the d-1 and separable depermutations. So then in this work, we considered a more general set of the mosaic floor plans. And we'll prove another bijection with more general permutations. So we have three results in this work. The first one is the proper definition of the d-floor plans, which we say are the objects that generalize mosaic floor plans to higher dimensions. So we'll see that it is not straightforward to generalize the objects because we have some condition to add. Then we've introduced a generating tree for those objects, which will allow us to find the first numbers of the enumeration sequences. And then we have the bijections that I've talked about. So in a sense, the idea of the generalization is quite simple. Just floor plans are made of rectangles. And to go to higher dimension, you replace the rectangles by hyperdimensional rectangles. So we call them d-rectangles. And when we do so, the segments that are induced by the partitioning will become d-1 rectangles, which are axis aligned. So in dimension d, we will have d type of such rectangles that we'll call block facets, depending on the axis which is given by the fixed coordinate of the block facet. So with this, you obtain a definition of the d-dimensional floor plans, which are the floor plans that are partitioned of d-dimensional rectangles by smaller d-dimensional rectangles. So then, if we want to consider the generalization of the mosaic floor plans, we have to generalize the tatami condition to higher dimensions, but we also have to introduce another condition. So we call it the generic condition, and it only appears in dimension greater than 2. So we can introduce it by saying that a border is the union of all block facets at a fixed position and of the same axis type. So for instance, if I have this floor plan, you can see the different blocks. It may be a bit hard to see, but here you have the borders that are shown in different colors. And we say that a floor plan is generic if all of such borders are also d-dimensional rectangles. So in 2D, the reason why this condition does not appear is that because it does not change anything in the sense that you just forbid to have two disconnected segments at the same position. So you only consider configurations like this, or like so. However, in greater dimension, you see that all of the block facets may be connected, but the union of all of them is not a rectangle. So here, the reason why we have to remove this configuration is that in the construction I will introduce later, these configurations are ill-defined. So we'll try to remove blocks to define peelings, and we will see that we can only do so when we do not consider those floor plans. For the tatami condition, it's straightforward to generalize it in higher dimension. You just say that two borders cross each other if the intersection of the entire is non-empty. And the floor plan fulfills the totemic condition if there are no borders crossing. So then we obtain that the D floor plans are the D-dimensional floor plans that fulfills both the generic and the totemic condition. So here we have 3 examples, again of 3 floor plans. And as in 2D, we can define posets of the blocks, now by considering borders between the blocks and not segments anymore. So in dimension D, we will have D different posets, and we have that 2 floor plans are equivalent if those posets are the same. Okay, so now that we've introduced our objects, how can we generate them up to some size, so up to some number of blocks? So to do so, we use an operation which we call the block deletion, which consists of starting from a floor plan of size n, and to go to a floor plan of size n-1. So to do so, we choose a corner of the floor plan. We forget the block that contains it. This results in an empty space in which we can slide a border towards the boundary to obtain a smaller floor plan. And here we have a lemma which tells us that if we remove such a block here, we have a unique way to slide the border such that the resulting object is a floor plan of size n-1. And here this lemma holds only if we remove the non-generic configurations. So if I go back to my configuration here, you see that, for example, if I remove this corner here, the borders are all intricated and I cannot slide anything. So then, this lemma defines me naturally a parential relation. Just, I start from a floor plan and I say that its parent is the one I obtain by removing a block. So with this, I obtain naturally also a generating tree, which tells me that I can start from the floor plan with 1 block, do the inverse of a block deletion, so I can insert blocks to obtain all of the floor plan of size 2, and I can do this recursively up to size n. But then, if I want to just count the number of floor plans at a given size, this is a bit computationally expensive to generate all of the structure of the floor plans. So what I can do instead is encode the structure of this tree such that the only information I have is the number of children of a floor plan and the number of children of their children. So to do so, I associate to each floor plan a label, and by reading this label I can know the number of children of this floor plan, and then I introduce what we call a rewriting rule, which gives me the label of its children. So this, as I said, this allows to encode efficiently the structure of the tree. And in the case d equal to 2, the structure can be encoded just by 2 parameters which are numbers. In higher dimension, this is a bit more tricky. So the labels are not given by some numbers anymore, but we have to use some vectors in n to the power d. So these vectors correspond to coordinate of corners on which I will be able to push to insert blocks. This implies that the number of parameters in the labels is not bounded, so I can have infinitely big labels compared to the case equal to 2. So to understand this structure, we can introduce a block insertion operation. So this is basically the inverse of deleting a block. So if I want to insert a block, I can start with a corner of the floor plan. I have 3 different borders on the boundary of the floor plan on which I can try to insert a block. In those borders, I will have block corners, which I will characterize to be pushable or not. So a corner is pushable if it generates with the corner of the floor plan a pushable facet. So this pushable facet is just a rectangle for which we have segments between the 2 corners, big Q and small q. So here, if I consider this pushable corner, for example, I can slide this facet to obtain an empty space in which I can insert a new block. But for example, if I try to do this in this corner here, you see that the segment does not go to the boundary of the floor plan, and I cannot push on it. So then here, this tells me that the number of children of a floor plan is the number of pushable corners in each border. So in the case d equal to 2, if I have a floor plan, like so, so I can push, and I consider this corner of the floor plan. I can push on all of the blocks, on the corners which touch the top and the right boundary of the floor plan. So for example, if I choose this one, I will obtain something like this. And you see that on pushing, when I'm pushing on this corner, I eliminate all of the corners that are closest to the corner of the floor plan. However, I also add in the other pushable corners a new one, which corresponds to the corner of the new block. So here, it's interesting in the sense that the list of corners on which I can push on the top boundary and on the right boundary does not interact with each other. So I can encode just my my floor plans by the number of corners in the top boundary and the number of corners on the right boundary. And then
You mean without knowing the positions?
I do not need the position, I just need the numbers, because in fact also every corner in the segment is pushable. And then if I look at the number, I know that I have one at the beginning, one at the second, etc., etc. The order is already induced. Because what I would have to be careful about is that if I push on something here, I may kill something here. But this is not the case, so I don't need the positions. Okay, and then the rewriting rule just tells me here that I can push on on the furthest corner and eliminate all other block corners, or eliminate all corners except one, and so on and so on. So I can do this both for the vertical or the horizontal segment. So, however, when I go to higher dimensions, and when I push on a corner, you see that I also eliminate some pushable corners in the other list. So here the two blue pushable corners are not pushable anymore after inserting a block. So here this means that I cannot encode the labels just by the number of corners, and I need to encode them with their position. So what I do instead in a higher dimension is that to each floor plan, the label associated is given by the list of position vectors of the corners, which are standardized with respect to each other. So for example, the furthest corner in the green boundary here will correspond to 0, 0, with a dot to say that it has fixed x coordinate. Same for the blue, where the dot corresponds to the y coordinate, here and here. And then, when I push on a corner, in this case, I know that I can look in the other list, and if I have some coordinate nx, x, y, z, I will eliminate everything that has a greater coordinate in the other list. So for instance, here I push on dot 1, 0, so I will kill everything for which the z coordinate is greater than 0, which are those two corners in the blue one and the green corner here. So this defines me the rewriting rule, which you can implement in Python, C, and so on, to obtain the following sequences of numbers. So here, the case d equal to 2 corresponds to the Baxter numbers, and for the other columns, we found no match in the OES in OES, and we tried to play a bit with these numbers, but we could not find any recurrent relation or some result on the enumeration. So this is the furthest we've gone on the enumeration of the D-floor plans. But what we've managed to do then is to characterize the floor plans in terms of permutation.
Can you go back, please, Thomas?
Yes.
Have you noticed that your last rule is always finishing by 5?
No. I mean, so here in fact,
Divide by 5 in the whole.
no, you can define by G every time.
Okay, you can divide by 2.
So this is kind of easy to see. It's because when I start with a floor plan in dimension 3, for instance, I can either insert something with respect to Z, something with respect to X, or something with respect to Y. But then, here, the branch is the same as this one and the same as this one.
Okay.
So everything is dividing, it can be divided by G.
Because there is a rotation symmetry.
Yeah.
that you can-
Of the axis, exactly. Okay, so enumeration results. So then we've characterized the floor plans in terms of permutations, so in terms of list of total orders. So in this part of the talk, I will give a bit of definitions which will allow me to present the results. So a D permutation, which we consider all the higher dimensional permutations, are given by tuples of D-1 permutations. And this, you can put it in matrix form by considering an n times D matrix, where in each line you put the permutation pi. So this matrix can be represented as a point diagram in a D-dimensional space by considering each of the columns of your matrix to be the position vector of a point. Then, in such matrix, you can consider patterns to avoid. So we say, given a D permutation, that it avoids a smaller D permutation called a pattern if it contains, a smaller D permutation if there is a subset of the point of your permutation that has the same configuration as the pattern. So, for instance, here, if I consider 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 3, 2, 4, I know that I have an occurrence of 3, 1, 2, 2, 1, 3, because I can consider those 3 points which, when I standardize them to have always a difference of 1 and to start with 1, I obtain 3, 1, 2, 2, 1, 3. So, a notation I will use is sim of pi for the whole family of patterns that are obtained by applying the symmetries of the D-grid on the pattern pi. So, for example, inversions and reflections and so on and so on. Another interesting point with D permutation is that you can consider lower dimensional patterns. So, for instance, I may be interested in forbidding some 2-dimensional configuration when I consider 3-dimensional permutations. So in this case, I will look at the projection of my permutation with respect to some axis. So in 3D, I have if I consider a 3 permutation, I will have 3 projections with respect to the x, z axis, y, z, and xy, which in this example are shown here. And I say that a D permutation contains a lower dimensional pattern if one of its projections of the same dimension contains it. So finally, the last definition I need on the permutation is the notion of generalized vincular pattern. So we've seen before a pattern, and the vincular pattern is just a pattern with some adjacency condition on the occurrences of the pattern. So for instance, if I have an occurrence of the pattern pi, I must have that this occurrence respects some condition with respect to the x-axis, y, and so on and so on. So more clearly, if I consider the permutation 1, 4, 3, 2, 3, 1, 2, 4, it has an occurrence of 1, 3, 2, 2, 1, 3, which is given by the first, third, and fourth point of the permutation. Then, if I look at the pattern with the adjacency condition 1, so here this one tells me that with respect to the x-axis, the points 1 and 2 must be adjacent. I see that here it is not respected because I have a gap between the two. So this is not an occurrence of this vincular pattern. However, if I consider these adjacency conditions here, you see that I go from 2 to 3 with respect to the x-axis, and in the blue coordinate, which correspond to this one, I go indeed from 1 to 2. So this is good. Okay, so I've defined all of my stuff. Now, how can I characterize my floor plans in terms of permutation? So, first, this question can be motivated from another question. So, we've defined the equivalence relation between the floor plans, which tells us that if the posets are the same of the blocks, the floor plans are structurally equivalent. But now, if I give you a set of D posets, how can I know that they can be used to represent a floor plan? So given this poset, can I reconstruct a floor plan from them? So to answer to do so, we need to characterize the posets, and we do so by looking at the permutations and characterizing them with some forbidden patterns. So first, the first property I have on my posets is that given two blocks, N, A, B, they are always comparable with in exactly one poset. So in 2D, you can show this by showing that you have 4 regions. So if I have a block, I can define some paths. And everything that is here will be on the right of A. Everything that is here will be on the left, and so on and so on. In higher dimension, you have the same result. And you can prove it by considering 2 pairs of blocks N, A, B. And you can delete blocks with respect to the different corners of the floor plan until either A or B contains the block, contains the corner. And when you do so, you will have that A will contain half of the corner of your floor plan, and B the other half. And you will have a single block facet which is not contained in the boundary of your floor plan, which is for which the axis defines the relation between the two blocks. Another property is that if I'm in dimension D and I take D union of posets, so for example I consider the relation A is to the left of B with respect to either 1 or 2, then, and I do this for the D coordinates, it is the total order of the blocks. So to show this, we can show that any union of the partial orders will correspond to some Peeling order of the blocks. So this Peeling order is obtained by choosing a corner. So here I choose the bottom left one, and by removing the blocks one by one. So then the order of deletion of the blocks gives me a list of the blocks which is totally ordered. So you see that here I first removed the orange block, then I remove the red one, the green one, the blue, and then I get the purple. And for instance, here if I consider the union A is to the left of B with respect to the axis 1, 2, and 3, it will correspond to the Peeling order with respect to the corner 0, 0, 0. So now, if I consider a floor plan of dimension 2 to the d-1, I will have many total orders. So I will have 2 to the d-1, different total orders. But in fact, to encode the floor plan, I just need d of such orders, which will allow me to reconstruct the posets of the blocks. So those are total orders, we call them the canonical ones, which are defined from the canonical corners, whose coordinates are given by packets of 0 and 1s. So the idea is that you start with a corner where you only have zeros, then you take half of the coordinates to be 1, then you split each packet into 2 and so on until you cannot do it anymore. So in 4D, you have only zeros, you have 4 of them, then half of the coordinates are 1, and then you split again into 2 and so on. So here, those corners are chosen such that between two corners, we have exactly half of the coordinates that differ. And here you have the representation of the peeling orders with respect to the posets. So then you can prove that if you have those peeling orders, if you know for two blocks the relation in the peeling order of the two blocks, you can reconstruct the direction relation between the two blocks. So you can see it. For example, if I have A which is to the left of B with respect to the axis 1, the only possibility is that A comes before B with respect to all of the peeling orders. So you can see this here, because this is the only one that matches all of the possibilities. So then this means that my floor plans in dimension 2 to the d-1 are encoded by D list of blocks, which will correspond to a D permutation. Okay, so I also have for free that this mapping is injective because my total orders are totally encoded by the partial orders of the blocks. And if two floor plans are not equivalent, the partial orders are not the same, so the total orders in turn are not the same. So here you have the formal definition of the mapping. So you take all of the peeling orders of the blocks with respect to the canonical corners Q1 up to QD-1, and you order all of them with respect to the first corner Q0. And this gives you a D permutation. So then with such a D permutation, you can prove that it avoids some configuration which is given by two families of patterns. So one of dimension 2 and one of dimension 3. So here, this pattern in fact corresponds to the non-two-dimensional case of Baxter permutations, and we have only one new family of patterns that appear. So to prove this, we can show that for the two-dimensional pattern, we will obtain some borders that cross each other, which does not fulfill the tatami condition. Then, if you translate this condition of the total orders into some condition of the posets, it means that in your adjacency graph, you try to avoid this configuration up to some color permutation. Okay. So for the second family of pattern, you can just show that if you have such a configuration in your peeling orders, it means that one of the corners will have a peeling order which is cyclic and is not well defined. So again here, in the poset, this corresponds to having some cycle of 3 colors. So here those edges are not necessarily edges, they can be paths of different nodes. So then here we started from the floor plan and we went to the D permutations. But if I give you a D permutation, how can I reconstruct a floor plan? To do so, we need to define posets on the point of a permutation which have the same properties as the direction relation of the blocks. So here, the poset we considered is obtained by considering the direction between 2 points. So this direction is just the vector where for each coordinate we consider the sign of the difference of the coordinate of the 2 points. So here you have the permutation with edges of the different relations, and this has a geometric interpretation, which is that if I have a point, I can consider 4 quadrants compared to it, which is minus plus, minus minus, plus plus, and plus minus. And if I have a point in one of those quadrants, here, A and B, it means that I have A, which is smaller than B with respect to the direction minus plus. And then, with those posets on the point, if you further consider only the permutations that avoid the patterns with we know that are not allowed in the floor plans, we obtain that they have the same properties as the direction relations. So here, the idea, as in 2D, the bijection associates each point of a D permutation to a block of the floor plans, and we have that each positive direction, which are only the quadrants when we have the x coordinate that is positive, is associated to an axis of the floor plan space. And this is done such that if we have a point in the quadrant, we know that we have the two blocks which are in the corresponding direction relation of the associated axis. And when we do so, we have that each permutation in your D permutation will correspond to one of the canonical peeling orders. Yes. So another interesting point with this is that in the permutation space, you can forbid some direction between 2 points. So for instance, in the 2D case, you can say that I do not want any point in the top left quadrant of the other points. So this tells me in the floor plan space that I will have a direction poset which is empty. So no blocks will be in relation to another in this direction. And this means that my blocks will, with respect to this axis, will always go to the minimal up to the maximal coordinate of the floor plan. Which means that I can shrink my floor plan in this direction to obtain a floor plan of dimension -1. So for example, here I have a 3-dimensional floor plan where all the blocks are not related to each other with respect to the z-axis, and I can flatten it from the top to obtain a 2-dimensional floor plan. So this means that if I have relation between the permutations which avoid 2, 4, 1, 3, 2, 2, and I think it's this. I can also consider some pattern of size 2. For example, some pattern of size 2 to obtain a floor plan of dimension 2 to the d minus 1 minus 1. And this is very interesting in the sense that I can, with this, I can consider a 3 permutation, which will be in bijection with a floor plan of dimension 4. But if I further avoid, for example, 1, 2, 1, 2, I will obtain a correspondence with floor plan of dimension 3. And this allows me to show you some figures. So here I'm showing you the algorithm which allows me from a permutation to construct the floor plan. The idea is that I start from the floor plan with one block, and then I look at the posets of each point 2 by 2, starting from the last one, and pardon? Okay. And I insert blocks up to the floor plan of size n. So here we have a video of it. So we start from the last block, then we look at the direction between D and E to know where I have to insert my block D, and I repeat this recursively until I have done it for all the blocks. So here again, I have a 3 permutation which avoid the pattern of size 2 to have the correspondence. Okay, so this leads into a bijection, which, I mean, we have the theorem which tells us that we have a bijection between the floor plans in dimension 2 to the d-1 and the d permutations that avoid 2, 4, 1, 3, 2 and 3, 1, 2, 2, 1, 3. And we call those permutations sub-Baxter d permutations because, in fact, in some previous work by Bonichon and Morel, they already generalized the Baxter permutations to higher dimensions using some geometric properties of the Baxter permutations. So here we have a table which summarizes the different objects. So in 2D we have the Baxter permutations, we have the separable permutations, and in higher dimensions we have the guillotine floor plans which are in bijection with the separable d permutations, and we have the d Baxter permutations, and our set of permutations falls right in between those two sets of permutations. So also, something I would like to emphasize is that here we have a construction that holds for any dimension, so for arbitrary d. But we see that the only difficulty arises from going to the case d equal to 2 to the case d equal to 3, which makes you appear this new pattern. But when you go to d equal to 3 to higher dimension, the structure remains the same. So this is kind of interesting, but because at first we were expecting to have more complicated structure when we go in greater dimensions. Okay, so I don't have time to. Yes. So we come to the conclusion. So what I would like to say here is that mosaic floor plans are in 2D already very interesting objects which are in relation with many other structures. And here we've introduced some generalization of these objects which now kind of behave kind of well because we've managed to perform all the constructions that are done in the 2D case in the same way. So this means that we have plenty of possibility of construction to generalize also in higher dimensions which are related to this object. So that's it for me, and thank you.
Questions?
Sometimes questions about pattern avoidance have the following algebraic meaning that you have a vector space with a basis indexed by combinatorial objects with some algebraic structure, and then you say that the pattern that you want to avoid, you just say that the corresponding things are sent to zero and you derive consequences from that. And then what avoids those patterns turned out to be a basis in the quotient. And I wonder if in some of the things that you are considering there is an algebraic object which corresponds to this.
So actually I think there are. So I'm not a pro in algebraic questions, but I know that Baxter permutations and floor plans, so people have done some Hopf algebra on them, and also there are some lattice structure which are obtained by some flip operations. So there is also some underlying algebraic properties of the subjects.
Yeah, but it's a good sign that there is an algebraic object with a basis, but then the next thing is to guess an algebraic structure for which divisibility will correspond to containment of a pattern, and that is much more subtle.
I see. But the examples here were in dimension 2.
Yeah.
In higher dimension, it's not
Well, so it should be some kind of higher categorical object, perhaps.
Or Gauss-Mannian permutations, for example, corresponding to Gauss-Mann. Okay.
Yeah, so thank you for a nice exposition, but I remember in my mind that such a permutation which avoid some pattern, this is exactly non-crossing partition which appear in free probability. That is well known. So did you know some contact? Because that will be maybe another approach to free probability, because using your dimension permutation. There is a many paper about this. I forgotten now, but we can find tomorrow. I can give you. Did you find also?
No, I did not look into this. But you mean
in many books even. Yeah.
But you mean patterns in general or the one of Baxter?
Permutation is special. I don't know this.
No, this is a very special pattern. It's a very special pattern. This is the word of Catalan and so on. Almost related to the previous talk by Reiko. Yes, exactly. So she could give also. He has more complicated forbidden patterns. So I don't think that there is such a nice formulation.
Because
In
not
fact, for the Catalan pattern?
It's leading to Catalans.
Okay.
But not only Catalan, you can find some Motzkin or some other.
But they are the same guys, yes.
I think I found this when I was younger in the Knut books, Art of Programming. I don't know which one, third volume is full of that.
Searching.
Himself, Knut, wrote paper about he called this multi-permutation. Did you know this?
No, I
Maybe
did
you
not.
can look. Knut, Donald.
Yeah, I will look into it.
This is for permutation avoiding
book, Art of Programming.
patterns of M3.
Yeah.
This is for permutation avoiding patterns like 3 to 1 or something like this.
Yeah, we got the
So it's not simpler because this is really the origin of this stuff. And it includes this 1, 2, 3 or 3, 1, 2, all of them are Catalan. And also the patterns are not consecutive. Here he had more complicated stuff because he mentioned the word vincular in which the patterns have to be consecutive and it makes the problem more difficult.
No, I don't claim that is the free. Maybe some better probability than free, because we're looking for some other aspects. So thank you for your talk and discussing. And I think maybe next conference you say, "Oh, I discovered." Did you know that the sequence what you wrote, the moment sequence? Because I think Professor Penson and you wrote some nice table of numbers. Did you try to see if this is moment sequence?
We tried to look at the numbers, but
Moment sequence, this is just you put the computer and the
we did put that in the computer, but
no, because that would be some step to understand if this is moment sequence of some probability measure. Why not?
no, we did not find
Other questions?
Yeah.
Did you divide by D and looked at the OEIS?
Yeah, we tried to divide by D also, yes.
I have questions. If you look on the cube from one side, then you can see only one face. But if you will look from the diagonal, you can choose diagonal, then you will see 2D faces, facets, and you will not see 2D other facets. So therefore you can define another permutation. So for each your construction, you just choose the direction in which you look, and then you just decide which shadow from this, and then you can just make kind of peeling of your correction of cubes in with respect to this how you can see how one shadow make shadow for another, and so on. So then you get some other permutations. So maybe they have the interest.
But I mean, for me, this is the way we do it for to define the permutations, because the peeling we define, it's exactly by starting at the corner and looking in the diagonal. So like if we look with respect to an axis, here we have the partial orders, but the total orders correspond to the diagonal.
Yeah. So you, but it's not total.
It's total.
No, because it could be two. So if you just, for example, split in 4 squares, you go from here, then you have two the same. So it will be partial order. But they will be related in some sense with respect to permutation, two moves.
I don't see.
In some sense, but here could be some multi-dimensional.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure if I got it.
But then you can get from this, you can get just. It's just like in the just with the rhombus tilings, you have permutations, but then you have a relation between them by, for example, two moves. So you just exchange commutation, and then if you quotient by this, then you get order on positive roots.
Okay,
so it's here, so therefore you just get a partial order from this, and then it would be just a set of all linear extensions. So you just see in some sense it's could be some set of linear extensions.
Okay. Okay, I have to look into this.
And another question: so is any some physical model behind of this?
Well, the physical motivation is a bit far for the. So here the thing is, for example, in 2D, you can see this as pavage, of a rectangle by rectangle. So here we only look at the topological side of it, so like the relative position and not the size of the blocks in themselves. But if you fix the size of the block, you can try to do some transfer matrix stuff and find the number of different pavages and so on. So it's a bit further, but I guess one of the motivation is really to go to higher dimension.
Which is some central question in physics as well.
Yeah, but in relation with the dimension 2 with relation to Maxim talk, so it's kind of 4 vertex model.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. But well, I don't see.
Some physical meaning for 4 vertex model.
Would be cool to be fine, yeah.
Yeah. Because here all of the vertices are kind of 8, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, it depends on the where it is in the.
But we can reverse the question.
Maybe
Is there some type of 4 or 6 or 8 vertex model in physics which are really deeply analyzed by people in physics? Because in general it is planar. But
but it's just 4 vertex models. So what could be easy? Okay, more questions?
So perhaps I have one again on the patterns and so on. So here you had your generating tree that you were getting answer for which in fact you cannot solve the equation.
Yeah, it's
even
not
get the equation and so on. But what about to add even more restrictive class in which you add a little bit some more forbidden patterns?
Yes.
And perhaps then in some cases there are some miracles and then you can get a nice decomposition.
So this will be very interesting to do in the sense that, for example, if I consider, I mean, what we could do is try to consider pattern avoiding rectangular floor plans, and such that the generating tree has a structure which resembles the one of the two-dimensional case. So in 2D, I think it was done, and they found many relations between the patterns and some non-sequences. So I believe this could be a good way to simplify our objects to obtain some way to enumerate them to subclasses.
Your object, it will be another family of
Yeah,
objects.
subclasses.
Which subclasses?
Yeah.
Okay.
In Maxim Kontsevich talk, there were, the 2D case, but with 8 different kinds of
But here 4.
Yeah, can you imagine generalizing to more your study to more, including more vertices type of?
You mean more?
Yeah, or it's really not possible?
So, I guess here.
The interesting part is to only consider T's, but one way, one thing which could be interesting to generalize is those configurations, which we did not consider. So it's not like considering more junctions between the borders, but this configuration is already a problem in our analysis, where we have only some proper connection between the borders. So I guess before trying to consider more intersections, we should try to analyze this.
One question, sir. Then we know, for example, like if we consider partitions, then we can count one-dimensional, so like two-dimensional partition, three-dimensional, but we cannot count. So there is no closed formula in high dimensions. So why you just play with this? Is it any hope to give something which could be related to high-dimensional partitions?
I don't know. Sorry, I'm not sure.
Because three-dimensional partition is just the pair of semi-standard tableau, or you can just look on a pair of permutations. Here, if you consider like D permutation, then in some sense you consider like formally D partition, and then nobody knows. So it probably doesn't exist. So maybe just from some physical meaning. So there is no closed formula.
But counting them will be a bit hard, I guess.
Or maybe some special.
Yeah, but this is a natural approach by Young diagrams and that multidimensional approach.
Yeah, but there is no formula, so nobody can count.
Yeah, yeah.
It's only one integration.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so then, thank you again.
Thank you very much.